Get off to a good start. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to the October 2021 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. So this is our lack of spooky Halloween edition for those of you in markets where such things are celebrated. Well, I guess celebrated probably isn't the correct word. Maybe participated in. It doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of houses around the neighborhood with fake pumpkins and fake spider webs and fake spiders that are way less scary than any of the real spiders that we have around, which I kind of find that one quite amusing. So today, obviously it's going to be quite a heavy focus on Windows 11, but we will touch on a few other things as we go through. Just some quick introductions. My name's Mark O'Shea, so I'll just hand over to Steve and Ben to do their quick intros in case you don't know them.
So I'm Steve. Because Ben's got his face full of jerky. I work at Microsoft. I'm a Microsoft Cat MMD resource. And Ben, obviously, now that he's finished eating, he can introduce himself.
I can. I'm Ben. I'm one of the developers at Patch My PC. I do lots of fun stuff over there, and I am obsessed with PowerShell and Intune.
Okay, so nice, easy,
and jerky.
Yeah. So we'll keep today's agenda pretty simple because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions, comments, feedback, anecdotal evidence, etc., over on what we've seen so far with Windows 11. But we've also got we'll talk about what plans we've got coming up for the next two sessions. So we're just trying to lock topics in a little bit in advance rather than sort of some of the last minute pieces that we've done in the past.
Don't know what you're talking about.
No idea at all. So I guess just one of the things we like to do at the start of each meeting is if there's anyone who's new or maybe who hasn't joined us for quite a while and just wants to do either a quick introduction via the chat window, or if you're somebody who is happy to unmute and do an introduction, please feel free to do so. Now I can see that they're
returning. Feel free to just jump on and
talk as well. Yeah. So if anyone feels like being an active participant, actually I didn't have chat open. I need to take a look. So Quack, is that oh sorry. Oh sorry, jump in, yeah.
I can jump in, yeah. So hello everyone, my name's Pete. I'm based up in Canberra. And yeah, I've been in IT now for a good 10 plus years in education. Started bottom of the ranks in education, which then got me into the MDM world, especially when the iPad got released. So, and everything's just evolved, and then started moving into obviously Intune is my big one now. Actually left my last job because I just weren't getting into it. They couldn't get the clients that had the funding to actually jump into Azure more and Intune more, and I felt getting left behind more and more. So I actually found a role with a UEM specific place, branding not included. And we do all around Australia and international UEM stuff. So that's been great. I've been playing with Intune and Azure now for 3 to 4 months now. Just jumped in, and some certain YouTube videos, some Intune training videos helped me out. And I actually owe my job to them a lot because before I started, I just went and just sat there and smashed it, made my own lab. So big kudos to those people involved in that. And actually found my way here because of client wanted patching done and was scratching my head at it. So Reddit suggested patch my PC. I called out to them, and then they chucked Ben at me. And I was just saying how I'm just wanting to learn as much as I want to breathe Intune and MDM and UEM and Azure. So he said, hey, there's a really cool chat actually coming like today on. So I was like, cool. So and here I am. So thank you to everyone. So here to learn.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Welcome. Anybody else want to have a chat? Oh, hey, Kenneth. Norway. Time zones are fun.
Yeah, so that was another thing I was going to say, Mark. We may find that we get more participation now that we're in fun time zone because we're arguably a little bit closer to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So this is my good 6 months as opposed to the last bad 6 months that I've just had.
Yeah, and I think this works out especially well for Europe AM.
Yes.
Because so for those of you not on the East Coast, actually, I can't even say the East Coast of Australia. For those not in 2 states in the East Coast of Australia, daylight savings has just kicked in, which means that, those of you who Jerome, for example, I can see, yep, you are there. This is potentially maybe a better time for you than usual. Please don't say it's a worse time for us. Okay, and we've got a bit of activity happening over in chat as well. Yeah, so
Okay.
8:30. So so it
Nice.
doesn't really mean So I guess morning coffee needs to be had in the morning, but I think Steve might agree with this. I don't know Ben's stance, but I don't think there's a bad time for coffee.
Well, no, if it's in the afternoon, it's just got to be Irish, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. See?
As long as it's still strong, as long as there's still a lot of coffee in it. None of that, essence of coffee nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Whatever's
Right.
in the cup, whatever's in the mug, as long as the other people think it's coffee, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
What it actually is, that's up to you and your personal life.
It's when it's a can.
Yeah. How you handle your mental health is up to you.
Listen, it's canned coffee.
Well, Mike, obviously this probably won't go into focus, but you've got to have your appropriately attired coffee mug. Remember
that's not a Windows 11 one.
I know. Remember back when there were events and you'd get given things? Which reminds me, we potentially need to start thinking about maybe holding an event in person.
Now that there's Freedom Day in Sydney.
Oh, yes.
We'll start traveling to the regions to Sydney. So.
Okay, so I think we've had a few people jump in, and hello to Nathan. I need to chat to you after the session, Nathan, about something. Nothing urgent. So let's jump in and just talk about what we've got coming up over the next few months. So next month is going to be Sentinel, a few Defender pieces. So both of the Defenders, even though there's a lot more than 2 Defenders, but both of the Defender families, as well as just a bit of log analytics, because there's some stuff that we'll cover today that I don't want to go too far down the log analytics rabbit hole this month when we're going to be doing that, or I've already been told Ben and Steve have nominated me for next month's session. So we'll be going down the log analytics rabbit hole next month. So there's a few things that I'll do a quick intro to tonight and then say come back next month, because it really starts tying more into, even though it's Windows 11 related, it's a better conversation as part of just a general log analytics conversation. And then for December, just kind of a fairly open one where we just want to talk about, effectively what are the big changes that have come through in Endpoint Manager over the last year. And in a lot of cases, this just ends up being an opportunity for pretty much everyone to say, I didn't realize that particular feature had been added in. Because unless it's something that you've been waiting for that you really need, when you're looking at the monthly updates, the monthly release notes, like, I don't know about you, but I skim over a bunch of it going, not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. And then 2 years later, someone says, when will Intune get this? And I'll go back and go, oh, it was actually introduced 2 years ago, in the April 2020 or 2019 update, I guess now. But if there are other topics that you sort of want us to sort of dig into as we move into, January, February, etc., definitely drop some ideas into the chat window, because I think we've pretty much gone through all of the things that people, suggested last time we asked everyone to nominate a few ideas. But if there's anything in particular that you do want covered, drop it into chat. On behalf of Ben, I'll say, Ben, probably will say no if you say, hey, Ben, how about doing another session on app deployment?
Yeah,
I think that you might say.
I've done that ad nauseum, but it still seems there's a huge appetite for it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if anyone doesn't know how to get onto YouTube, then yeah, I can definitely do another one.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we'll jump straight into the preparing for Windows 11 deployments. Now, we could just make this a pretty easy conversation and wrap it up in 2 minutes and say pretty much most things are going to keep working the way they're currently working. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. It's time to go back to your families or your jobs. But there are a few things that we'll watch out for, that we'll talk about here. And we covered a little bit of this stuff when we did the session back in, was it July or August? I think I should know because I went back and repurposed a couple of the slides I created for it. We did not record that session deliberately because there was just a bit too much uncertainty and we didn't want anything to backfire on things that we assumed would happen. But I'm sure if we went back and watched and listened to the recording, or actually there was no recording, looking through the slides, I don't think there was anything that really changed all that much. The main thing that we had concerns about early on, as you can probably imagine, was, is the line in the sand going to change in terms of the hardware requirements? And some of the specific, if you don't have this, it's not going to move forward. And there were some pretty minor changes to that. I think there was still a bunch of confusion over what you could run, especially with people who are in the insider program, etc. I think there's still like random confusion there around what should or shouldn't be working. So I'm at the point now where it's like, if something stops working, I'll just accept it and go, I need to give it off to a family member with Windows 10, 21 something loaded onto it, and then hope for the best. But here are the topics that we'll go through. Now, we're not going to, I've only really got one slide per each of these because, generally speaking, we'll jump in, do some demos, and no doubt there's going to be plenty of questions, plenty of interaction. So we're not going to do a death by PowerPoint type of session, but I guess just to get some talking points in place, these are the items that we will go through. And for anything that kind of falls outside of scope of these, but it's something that you want to know about, if it's something that's kind of related to what we're talking about, just drop it into chat or unmute yourself if you want to do that. Because even if it's not something that Ben, Steve, or I have had firsthand exposure to, the chances are someone else in chat has already started to look at it or already encountered some of the same issues. But for the final section, what I just really want to do right at the end is just sort of get everyone to sort of jump in and start giving a bit of their, the firsthand experience that you've got already with Windows 11, maybe some of the things that you like, some of the things you don't like, some of the things that have caught you by surprise. Now, what I'm finding is that there are some like minor differences that tend to be the most annoying. So things that don't actually prevent, that aren't a functionality change in reality, but just little UI bits or pieces where it's like, hang on, where is that thing? And I've been staring at it for 5 minutes. And I'll use the example, if any of you have used Autopilot with Windows 11. So has anyone used Autopilot on a Windows 11 VM or device? So what does that initial sign-in screen look like?
Significantly different.
Yeah, and there are not as many of the clues telling you that Autopilot succeeded. So the first time I saw that new landing page, I was looking at it going, I think my Autopilot is broken. But I'll sort of jump up and show it to you because it's something that, it's going to be pretty easy for people to miss that it is actually configured and working. Now, I'll just take a quick look over in chat to see.
I'm watching the chat there, Mark.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
So all good. Okay, so let's just jump into the hardware requirements. Now, I think there were some minor changes overall in terms of CPUs being last-minute additions to the list. And probably one of the ones that we sort of did call out as something that would potentially get a bit of flack for not being included was the CPU that was in Surface Studios. The most recent Surface Studios were basically a device that was not going to support Windows 11. And I don't know if you've ever looked at the price of those things, but you would not want to buy it and then go, oh, this could be an issue. So they were added. I think there are a couple of other minor changes here or there, but I think the logic we were using back in that July meeting, where it pretty much looked like it was anything pre-Spectre / Meltdown in terms of CPUs didn't make the cut, and things post Meltdown and Spectre, as long as they weren't based on the older architectures, those things did make the cut. Now, this is one of those things where, you look at the people who are complaining the most about it, and what I guess what some of the bigger issues are. Sometimes it's hard for me to feel, to exhibit empathy or to try to show sympathy when I'm like, what were you thinking? Why did you think that was something that would always be supported moving forward? And it's, but otherwise, these are not, these are not what I would classify as unusual requirements. And I guess, the number of people sort of saying, oh, my device doesn't support a TPM or whatever. And it's like, even virtual TPMs have been supported in most decent hardware for years.
Since at least 2017, there was a very definite cutoff. I know this because we were playing around with self-deployment stuff back in the, or self-driven deployment or device-driven deployment stuff that required the TPM stuff. I think it was like June of 2017 was when hardware started having that standardized experience. And this is something that I've found on Twitter a lot, and it really, really frustrates me, that this seems to be the biggest thing that most people complain about, but it's also the thing that almost everyone has. Almost all CPUs since June of 2017 support software-based TPM of some form. Now, arguably, that is less secure than a hardware TPM, but also I've never had a problem with it. It works just fine. So it's just something that, if you think that your hardware doesn't have it and you've not actually verified in BIOS that you can't support FTPM or whatever the Intel one is, I guarantee it's probably fine.
So I was actually shocked that I was able to get so even though I'm just using FTPM on the AMD side, I was actually shocked that I could get a hold of a physical TPM at a reasonable price, just in case I wanted to do testing with it.
Oh, you actually bought a?
Yeah, I actually bought one. Yeah, bought a hardware one, and it's like, I don't think I've ever purchased a TPM before.
Yeah.
I've bought some random stuff over the years, but never a TPM. But most of the time though, and this is going back years, I've always used, probably for at least 10 years now, I've used must have a TPM as a way of filtering out devices that just should not be, systems that just should not be on the list. Mm-hmm. Obviously it wasn't TPM2 back then, but otherwise the requirements aren't, just are not that high, and nothing about the requirements, especially the CPU side, the requirements aren't really about performance. And I think that was what a lot of other people were getting upset about, where it's like, so sorry, I will use, who was it? It was Peter. Sorry, I'm going to use Peter as the example here because he shared some information with us prior to the session. But, Peter's got an earlier gen Threadripper, which didn't make the cutoff point for what was supported. Now, I know that Peter's not, I'll assume that Peter's not someone who's going to go on the internet and complain that, how dare Microsoft support Atom CPUs but not support my way cooler Threadripper. No one is saying that Atom CPUs are better CPUs than a Threadripper. It's just that the Atoms that are supported have got certain hardware features enabled in them. But otherwise, the lists didn't really change that much. I think there are a few things that they kind of missed on that first scrub. I'm sure we'll probably see some minor changes here and there, but realistically, if it's something that's not on there now, just work on the assumption it's never going to be there. It's a safer, maybe it's a less comforting option, but it's a safer option. Now, in terms of some is anyone seeing anything weird around hardware that should be supported that's not currently working?
Feverishly waiting for Quark to respond.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if anyone wants to jump in. Yeah, I guess for me, like what I've seen is that some of those initial insider allowances where it was like if your system doesn't support secure boot or if it doesn't have a TPM in it, we'll still roll it out. I'm starting to see those devices there, and you'll see this in some of the reporting that we'll take a look at. Some of those devices are basically stuck now. And in one case, I've got a machine that does support UEFI, but does not support secure boot. So that's a good combination.
Surface. Okay, so Urine has said that the Surface Book 2 is not supported yet for Windows 11. When did the Surface Book 2 come out?
Yes,
I'm going to go with a long time ago.
Probably like so. Yeah, so I guess it could be like if it was something that was 6th or 7th gen versus 8th gen, like if they did a refresh, I guess that's the
Surface Book 2 release date was November 16, 2017.
Okay.
So it's on the cusp. So there may have been early models that did make the cut.
What I'm suggesting there.
Revisions, yes.
Yeah, so the edge case scenarios like that, you'll find that it'll be it's one of those things where being on the bleeding edge sometimes comes to bite you, you know.
Yeah, that they had an i5 generation that was the 7 series, but most of them were 8 series. But it could be that there's just a feature missing.
And I'm not saying that we're ignoring Nathan's question about M1, but I think we're all ignoring Nathan's question about M1.
Listen,
when Apple's willing to support Windows on their devices.
if we've got native Linux subsystem support, who's to say it's not possible?
Yeah, like and in that case, it's just really more of an like, it doesn't make sense to create a native version. It's because it just would not be, no one would have the ability to support it properly because Apple would say no to the OS side and Microsoft would say we can't support that hardware if you have issues. That's just keeping things pretty simple there.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's, I don't think there's too many surprises. Even though I think it was kind of the way some of the initial hardware requirements were announced, I think it's going to take a while for people to kind of recover from that experience because there was, one day there was one message, the next day there was another message that conflicted. But since that initial layout, I don't think there's really been anything too drastic. It just seems more, to me, it just seems like they're starting to enforce what they said they were going to enforce moving forward. Mm-hmm. Now, how many of you, apart from maybe some of your own personal use devices, how many of you have got customer environments or even like your own work environment where you do have a lot of devices that are impacted by this? Is this something that you're really seeing in a commercial environment?
Back when years and years and years ago, back when I was doing rollout, sort of desktop refresh as an actual profession, they were doing, their lease on hardware was 3 to 4 year cycles. So, there's a chance that there could be like an edge case there that if you are doing a 4 year lease cycle, you could be on the edge. But to me, I feel like a 3 to 4 year cycle for hardware is a fairly standard scenario for most orgs.
Yeah. Now and then the other scenario where I think you will see some impact around this is when people are buying deliberately buying the previous versions of devices in order to get them at a better price. So, Microsoft releases Surface Pro 8 and Surface Pro 7s, all of a sudden 30%, everyone's running 30% off specials on them, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other thing that I think that you'll sort of see here, where the challenge there with the messaging is to that person, that's a 2-year-old PC because they bought it 2 years ago. They don't realize that model may have been introduced 4 years ago.
Yeah,
so back to that 2017 timeframe. But then, but actually, let's talk about some of that stuff on the next slide, because we've also got the Windows 10 piece down here. Let's start at the bottom for this one. So the other thing here is that anyone who's really complaining and angry about this, it's like, just run Windows 10 until October 14, 2025. And that's excluding what you can do with long-term servicing channel if you've got access to that. So whatever year Microsoft releases that latest version of LTSC, and I haven't seen any info at all about this recently, but that would give you another 5 years. So if they do an LTSC version of Windows 10 in 2024 and you're licensed for it, you'll be able to run that in a supported manner until 2029. So there are obviously a bunch of gotchas around running LTSC. And I think Bock has already posted a link in the chat window that, the Surface team do not support LTSC, and the Office 365 apps / M365 apps do not support LTSC either. So probably for a lot of the people on this call, LTSC is not going to be a great stopgap solution. But in 2025, these devices are going to be another 4 years older than they are already. So but I guess, so and one of the comments I just saw from Pete, which I think is something that we need to, that is potentially an issue here, is, for people who like to run their PCs into the ground before they replace them, is this going to generate e-waste, a couple of years before it would normally do it? I don't know, hopefully people are sort of finding causes to donate what they view as inadequate PCs to, so that at least someone can keep doing something with that machine.
Definitely.
Stephen's had a fashion accessory change.
Yeah, he had a battery-related fashion.
You changed
fashion
from black
design.
headphones to white headphones, or grey headphones.
No, I changed from earbuds
to
cans, because somebody decided to be in meetings all day and have flat batteries in their earbuds.
Oh, yeah, and look, and Scott's even calling it out. People are going to keep Win 10 around for ages.
It's still supported until 2025.
Yeah, and then and even as it gets close to the end of support, you'll have people saying, "Well, I'm not going to move to Windows 11 because the start menu layout isn't exactly the same as Windows 10," or whatever other random things people come up with. But it'll be interesting to see how that conversation goes. Hopefully we don't ever get back to that point like we had with XP and then with 7, where people are using them for so long that it becomes problematic to get people away from them. But otherwise, if we
curious to know, and obviously feel free to just put a comment in the chat or anything like that, but are most people on the call here planning in the next 2 years to start that migration to Windows 11, or are you looking to wait until the last minute?
We're still trying to get 1909 out the door.
Yeah, but how many computers are you targeting, Scott?
No, 320,000.
So that's like a long weekend's worth of work there for you.
Yeah.
It will probably knock a couple of thousand over in the pilot. We'll see. Windows 11 will probably be something that we make available, I'm guessing, more towards the end of next year. So the question I'm wondering is if there's going to be a 21H2 for Windows 10, or what is supposed to happen there.
The thing I love about Scott's environment is, even if we go back to when the O365 pilot was being run, it was a small pilot. It was only 6,000 users. So then if we just sort of quickly go through some of the life cycle and servicing, I think all of this messaging has been consistent from when they first announced. So I guess the big one, it's one feature update per year, not twice per year. Now, I think for a lot of organizations, if they were thinking about it, they were basically eliminating the H1 release from the conversation anyway. And Microsoft was moving towards, go to the deploy the H2 release. You get 30 months of support on that one versus 18 months. But it was like, I guess the twice per year releases was a much better conversation than the as many as we get out the door conversation, which it started off as. Like if you go back to the early Win 10 material, like there was just, it's like, yeah, we'll release them whenever we feel like they're ready, which is not a great message. Your things that you kind of think would be learned over time around making things predictable for IT being something that IT might prefer. Sometimes, and I think we all know, a lot of people come in and out of different organizations, and sometimes the voice of reason, who knows what they should say, just sits back in the meeting and goes, I've said no enough in this meeting. I'm not going to say no, that's a terrible idea, because I'm already known as the guy who always says no to things. So 36 months, but that's for your enterprise and education version. So so basically, up to 6 months more. So basically 3 years versus 5 years for LTSC, and you get a version of Windows that you actually want people using. And then for Pro for Workstation and Pro Education and Home, then that's jumping up to 2 years instead of 1.5 years. So even that's a bit of a better story. But the reality is that for actually, at least on the Home side, those aren't going to be managed in 99.9% of, actually, we could probably say 99.999% of the cases. So basically they're going to get an annual update anyway, as long as their machine qualifies for the hardware requirements. But then your quality updates, etc., no real change. Nothing needs to change there. Good old, second Tuesday of every month, or we need to come up with a better name for other time zones where it's already Wednesday. Is it Wacky Wednesday, or there has to be? Sorry,
Patch Wednesday.
It's not Patch Wednesday. I had a conversation with a customer today where I actually got to say, now that Patch Tuesday is a lie, right? And he giggled heartily at that one.
But if you stay up later, though, it's true. It's for very late values of Tuesday. But otherwise, look, I think pretty much everything here is good on the lifecycle and servicing side. Has anyone seen any extra information on the LTSC side around Win 10 and Win 11, or are most of you like me and you try to pretend that it doesn't exist so that you don't get roped into conversations on it?
Does it exist?
Yeah, that's a weird acronym. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, LT.
I've heard LTSB.
Yeah, well, that's another one. So there is LTSC and LTSB. Oh, there are cats fighting out the front. I don't know if you can hear them. No. But noise cancelling is working.
Teams noise cancelling is good.
So let's see. So the LTSC/LTSB stuff. Use it if you don't have a choice, or find work around the issue that is making you use it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one's pretty straightforward. Now, what are some of the places now that you will start getting some information around, what is, or what's causing issues for your current fleet of devices? Now, you can see I've carefully gone through and removed part of the name, but I basically aligned it also. It just looks like I've got 1.5 character device names in there. But so I guess just here, this is just through endpoint analytics through MEMAC. Just on the licensing side, it's something that I've never tested it with a pro device to see if a pro device will actually report through, because in a lot of these cases where you'll see the, where it's not a technical thing we're deploying, where like in this case it's reporting, the way to view it is, or my assumption here is that you need the Win10 Enterprise E3 or E5. Actually, no, they're just for the proactive remediation pieces. So you just need your Intune or Config Manager license to get the pieces reporting in. So that's not an issue. If you want to take advantage of some of the other endpoint analytics features, that's where there is potentially going to be some additional licensing as part of that. But if you just take a look over here at what in this case, all of the devices that are reporting through basically, not showing any issues. Now, this is actually not quite true in this environment, because there are two devices here that actually, at least two devices that haven't moved up to the latest build. So I think they're basically like just slightly short of being the GA version. And but because it's seeing that they've got Windows 11, it's not actually reporting them through as being problematic in this view. But it will go through and show you, what the issues are. So I like this one here, CPU bitness. But this way, at least you can sort of start to get an idea of what's in there. You can start filtering. So if you haven't enabled endpoint analytics, just easy enough to go through and turn it on in the tenant.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just sort of checking nothing over in chat. So I guess then for endpoint analytics, there's just enable it, start getting some data, and start seeing what turns up. Now, there are going to be a few different ways that you can start identifying what's potentially becoming problematic in here or in your fleet. Now, we'll talk about this a lot more next month because it's got the log analytics component to it. But you can also start reporting through to this update compliance has been around for a hell of a long time. It was one of the components of Windows Analytics, but the other components got killed when desktop analytics was released. But update compliance is in there for, I guess, your cloud managed PCs. And if you haven't looked at update compliance for a while, I hate to break it to you, but it hasn't really changed. It is still the ugly OMS experience that it started its life as. So is that the Azure Portal? Yep. Let me just jump into solutions. And down here under was insights. Now, it doesn't look too bad so far, but don't worry. Here we go. This is really, really, this is a many years old OMS style view. Now, in this case, you can see that this one is actually starting to call out that I've got a few devices that aren't, that basically aren't compliant. And if we jump in and take a look at the ones that it's showing us here, it's going to push us out to log analytics. And basically with both of these, what you can see is that they're running, actually you can't really see it because I don't have the other builds up, but they're running an older version. So these are some of the devices that I was mentioning that have been blocked from moving up to the GA version where they started enforcing some of those changes. But keep an eye on update compliance because so far there's nothing showing up in most tenants around Windows 11 specific features. But this is something that I think, keep an eye on this because I think you'll start to see some other changes roll through to this pretty soon. I don't think or I won't work on the assumption that the UI is going to be updated. I'd love the UI to be updated a bit. But the other thing that I really want to be fixed in here, and I call this out on the slide, notice that it's actually calling out that, yeah, we've got 16 devices, 14 of them are on Windows Insider. What do you think that means for the Insider machines? It means that most of the reporting isn't actually being collected and coming through. So if you're running this in an environment where it's purely Insider built, so let's say a lab environment where everything is Insider, you're going to be staring at this going, they told me 24 to 48 hours before reports would show up, and I've been waiting 24 to 48 days. Very little is going to show through. So you can see at least now that they do call that out. Now, the other thing you used to be able to do with this that I don't know if you can still do it, is you used to be able to go through and populate it with a bunch of dummy data, so you could end up with thousands of devices that you could then start at least sort of filtering on and get an idea of some of the things that could be useful for troubleshooting purposes. But hopefully soon we see some of the Windows 11 pieces start to light up in here. And this will just be another tool. Now, just a few points that we've got over on the slide for this one is that, it does require log analytics, which means that you do need an Azure subscription for this. Now, even if they didn't zero out the charges at the end of the billing period, you're talking about a service that's probably going to be, apart from Scott's environment, for most people, this is an environment that's going to be like a cents per month kind of cost that would get zeroed out. Scott's would be a couple of dollars per month potentially. But again, those costs get zeroed out. Now, they've also gone through and added a few additional settings in there that if you're someone who's just had this running in the background without paying too much attention, I'll just quickly show you, where is it? Under, what have we got? It's not desktop analytics, it's update compliance, not to be confused with update compliance. This is update compliance. It's got pi in it.
So the best kind of compliance.
So just the thing to sort of keep an eye out for in here is that there are a couple of additional settings that you need to drop in. And of course, even if you go over to the settings catalog, you're not going to find these things in here. Now, hopefully I've been hoping this for several years now, but it hasn't happened. Hopefully if it's something that they want people to start using heavily, someone jumping out and looking at the documentation and going, hang on, what do I need to do? I need to go out, actually, and of course, I need to edit it first. That's why I can't see the edit. Actually, I should not click on that one. I should click on this one instead. And basically it's just telling it, here, based on, what are the CSPs we need to call, and, easy enough to go through and update the existing ones. It's all documented. And I'm kind of assuming that basically the changes that they've made in here will allow some of that additional, update compliance reporting to start coming through. So we'll revisit this one in a bit more detail next month. If there's anything in particular that does change with that one. Now, I guess just a general question: how many of you just thought or just assumed that the update compliance that solution we just looked at? How many of you have either never seen it before or thought it was killed when desktop analytics became available? When desktop analytics became available for config manager users. Let me be quite clear about that. So this is one. So the reason why I'm sort of spending a bit of time on this one is that this was one of the things that I thought would be giving us guidance towards hardware compat issues that we might face as new builds of Windows roll out that don't support your current CPU or chipset or whatever. So it's probably, so if they do, so I think they've still got an opportunity to put some of that stuff in, because obviously not everyone's going to upgrade to Windows 11 this week or next week or this year or next year. So it's one of those things where right now it's kind of really stripped back. And for me, I keep it running because, as I said, it doesn't cost anything to keep it running. I've got an Azure subscription in this tenant, but otherwise, if you are running it against machines that are running GA versions of OSs, you actually start getting things like centralized DO reporting, which this is the only place you'd be able to get that if you weren't using Config Manager, for example. So so there is some good stuff in it. So it's still alive. And if anyone's got any other questions on it, like I'll chat to you after the session about it. But hopefully we've got a few things to talk about next month with this one. Now I think we covered most of it. I showed you the OMA URI settings in there. Now there's also this thing. There's a deployment script that you can sort of run against a piece or run on a PC to go through and just check that, probably I'd say using that deployment script is probably better used to just verify that you've got outbound network connectivity, et cetera, that the endpoints are available to you. Because any of the configuration settings that are in that deployment script, you can either push it out through Intune, as I just showed, or you can push it out through group policy. So I don't really know why. Like, I can't see somebody being in an environment that's as unmanaged, that's completely unmanaged to the point where you're pushing a script out to enroll them in this. Like, I'm not really seeing how that badly and unmanaged an environment would be, why those people would particularly be interested in this or even know that it exists. Now, I might be, I could be completely wrong on that one. So we won't spend too much more time on that one because it's ugly and it needs a facelift and it needs some more features and it needs to support insider builds. Sure. At which point I will actually start paying a lot more attention to it. Okay, so this is where I think probably we can really start opening up the conversation here. So those of you who are planning on upgrading sometime soon, what approach are you going to be taking to upgrade devices?
I can sort of answer that on behalf of sort of what we're doing internally. So we're obviously a very small team, so it's easy for us to move very agile. We just did we had an all hands meeting, and we just flagged if anyone's interested in drinking the Kool-Aid and getting real early on with Windows 11, let us know. We got a whole bunch of hands, so we just set up a Windows Update for Business policy, put the users in it, and never thought about it again. We sent out an email advising them that they were going to get a notification about an update, and that went through. It's didn't really need to overthink it.
I think Steve is trying to decipher a message in chat. Steve looks more intense and focused than I've seen him ever. So I think pretty much everything is lighting up. Just making sure that whatever tool you've got, whether it's if you're using WSUS or SSCM or even a third-party tool, that you're just going in and checking the option for Win11 as well as potentially Win11 insider builds if that's also of interest to you. Now, when it comes to the coexistence story, there's not really all that much to talk about. I guess the conversation that we should, or that hopefully we get to have, is it's just keep doing whatever it is you're doing. Now, I guess over time, though, we probably will need to start doing things such as filtering who we are targeting policies to, as Win11 gets new policies that aren't necessarily backported to Win10. But otherwise, for most of your defaults, the things that you're pushing out to Windows 10 today, there's probably not a lot that really needs to change. There'll probably be, obviously there are going to be some minor things here and there that you might need to address. But it's, this is something that, I don't know how if we're supposed to say it, because we kind of go against saying this in the next slide, is, it's almost, in the way that we're approaching upgrades and coexistence, in a lot of cases, it's like we're running another Windows 10 feature update.
Yeah. Can I, Mark, I just got, so someone put a question in the chat kind of around that as well. They were just like, has anyone come across Azure AD Dynamics group settings for Windows 11 compatibility? And that kind of ties in with what you're saying. Kind of no, because it's in the eyes of everything that's out there. This is kind of Windows 10 and later, you know? So
Yeah.
it's not seen as another iterative version. It's just seen as Windows 10 with a fancy skin. Like, yes, there's obviously significantly more than that, but as far as policies and as far as the way that you manage them, the idea is that right now, at least, anything that you're doing for your Windows 10 environment should marry across quite easily. So you don't need to create dynamic groups for your Windows 11 machines. I can understand scenarios where you would definitely want to understand which machines got Windows 11 and which ones got Windows 10. But I can't right now think of a scenario where you would only want to apply a policy to just your Windows 11 machines versus your Windows 10 machines. So I guess that's a rather long-winded way of saying I don't think that is going to exist in the near future.
No. And I think even some of the things that were that were added new for Windows 11 in terms of controls, like no doubt some of that stuff is already backported to Windows 10, at least more recent versions, or will be backported.
Yeah.
Now, anything that's new core OS functionality, obviously that's not going to be backported, but anything they're doing to expose, additional settings that Windows 10 had that were never exposed easily to Intune, like that stuff generally does get backported.
Sure.
Now, I guess the other thing then is just around, app compat. Pretty much the story is the same. It's like, the app comp, I guess, the things where you're going to see app compat issues here are kind of the same issues that you've probably seen over the last how many OS releases over how many decades, where anything that's a particularly low-level tool, for example, then things like antivirus engines or whatever, like they're things that generally don't survive well when things do start changing, even if it's a minor change. But that's no different from anything else from this conversation over God knows how many Windows releases over the last few decades. It's like shock horror, blah, 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 didn't have their anti-malware engine updated. Well, actually, no, the message has changed, because the message used to be blah, 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 antivirus isn't supported on Windows, whatever. Now it's their anti-malware solution isn't supported on Windows 11.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the major change. But otherwise, if you do have, if people are hitting any kind of compat issues, if you're big enough, you've got Azure available. And I think, I haven't paid attention to this for a while, but the last time I looked at it, I think it was you needed to have 150 seats of M365. Does that still sound right to everyone?
Is that for the Azure team?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of like a minimum requirement in terms of, or at least on paper, I think there's kind of like an entry point in terms of how big the customer needs to be. But then I've been at other sessions at Ignite and stuff like that, where those team members will say, oh, even if you don't quite qualify, reach out to us anyway, because it's something that maybe someone else is going to hit.
It's also one of those stories, Mark, where if you've got a real hairy application that you just cannot get working, they kind of like the challenge. I've definitely reached out to them. Granted, if there was that limit, then we reached it in the scenario that Steve and I ran into. But that was never a conversation. It was just, we heard that you had a terrible application. We want to make it work.
Yeah.
So I've never really been sure about what the licensing is on that one.
Yeah, like I think I'm pretty sure like they used to say 150, but I could be completely wrong. And the reason why I remember that is 150 just seemed like a weird number, because it didn't align with any of Microsoft's segmentation, where it's like, if it was above 250, then it's like, okay, they only want to target enterprise agreement customers, but 150 is kind of a nothing number. Now, the other option that I've got listed in there, I don't know if anyone's ever looked at it. You've got test base for Microsoft 365. And this is an Azure.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, it's an Azure service that's available, but it's definitely geared towards app devs.
Yes.
So they can test their applications where they can link in their application test harness and do automated testing. It's not it's not possible to have it link into your corporate environment and to do your testing and smoke testing in the test space. So it's designed so you can do unit testing of an application, you can do functional testing of an application against a non-production environment or an isolated environment, but it's not designed to be this overarching, I'm going to spin it up and test my corporate applications on my corporate environment. It's typically designed for the application developer and the application vendor to do the testing.
Yeah, and more of an app by app approach in there. It's like we have an app that we need to deal with. Now, do you know anything about the pricing for it? I'll just work on the assumption that whatever VMs or whatever it's spinning up under the covers, you probably have to pay for. I don't know either. But even if you, so if you just sort of, any of you who've got Azure subscriptions, if you just go to search and search for test base, it will light up in there for you. Okay, so Jacob's got 150 licenses plus subscription level. Is it 150 plus M365 E3? That's the thing that is kind of floating around in my head, but it's been a few years. Oh, okay, so it's basically just tied to Fast Track. Okay, I guess that would actually make a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so look, there really shouldn't be a lot to talk about here on the upgrade and coexistence side. I guess you probably wouldn't want to be a user using like default start menu layouts, etc., and jumping back and forth between Win 10 and Win 11. That would drive muscle memory crazy with your mouse clicks and going to open menu items that aren't there. But otherwise, like from the IT side, it's more of what we've been doing in reality.
I think I maybe said this before we started recording, but the one pet peeve that I've had is not having direct access to 7-zip in the context menus. But that is there's the documentation that is available for all software vendors to modify their solutions to include any right-click context menus in the sort of the first class pane. So I don't imagine that's going to be a problem that is going to exist for very long. Everything else has been fairly standard for me.
Yeah.
So just on that test-based pricing model at the moment, Mark, during the preview phase, there is no cost.
Oh, okay.
And as a result of that, obviously, there's no visibility. Just for reference, I'm just going to quickly share this screen grab. Where you'll see down the bottom for pricing, it's explicitly grayed out saying standard SKU, you'll not be charged during preview. Beyond that, I'm not aware.
Okay, so the fact that they're saying you won't be charged during preview is kind of inferring that you will be charged post preview.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been many lawyers involved.
Oh yes. Yeah. You're not allowed to say free.
Yeah.
You can say no cost service, but you're not allowed to say free.
It's free as in preview.
Yeah. Okay, so with Windows Update for Business, probably the main things here is and this is where some of that message around treat Win 10 just like Win 11, like where it's not, where things are different versus that other messaging we just mentioned on the last slide. So we do need to specifically target the devices that we want to move to Win 11. And this is an area that you'll start seeing a few changes coming through. I'm not quite sure what we're allowed to talk about here just yet. So I'm going to be incredibly vague to not get myself into trouble. But this is a UI you should keep an eye on over the next couple of months, or maybe even sooner. So again, so basically instead of choosing, using actually, let's just switch out to the portal quickly just to look at it. If we just jump into devices, and yeah, so basically all that slide is really telling you here is, don't use the update rings for targeting, because that's basically going to keep you on the OS that you are on. It's not going to upgrade you from Win 10 to Win 11, but it would take you from 21H1 to 21H2, for example. Yeah. So it's really this feature updates piece, and you can see I've already gone through and done created that profile for Windows 11. So this is a UI that once we go into properties and then edit that, you should start seeing some changes come through here over the next month or two that you will like. You will like a lot, without trying to give.
Good work, Mark. You've done well.
Anything away. Yeah, you have to be careful with wording sometimes. So other things here is that if it detects that the devices don't meet the Win 11 requirements, then obviously they're not going to be upgraded. But I guess probably what I'd start doing here is, once you've identified those Windows 10 devices that just are not good candidates for Windows 11, just break them out. So anything that's Windows 11, break those out. Break it out into a separate group. Now, other things as well here is, because we're using, if we're going to be using Windows Update and not necessarily having any kind of, on-prem storage like we'd have with WSUS or pushing it out through Config Manager, if you've got the opportunity to use delivery optimization, just like every other, feature update, driver update, etc., that normally comes down through Windows Update, DO is going to do a good job of saving you internet bandwidth and maybe overloading your Wi-Fi network if you don't. Actually, it will overload your Wi-Fi network if you don't go through and configure it properly. So just on the DO side, if you are taking a bit more of a staggered approach with it, make sure that you're going through and maybe adding a bit more time. So I think by default, DO stores files for like 3 days or something like that. So it kind of assumes there's going to be an initial swarm and then everything dies off after that. And there might be the occasional straggler who needs it. So they're kind of saying, look, we don't want to use your disk space if that thing isn't going to be used again. But if you're in a tight bandwidth environment, just bump up, sort of set a percentage of disk space that can be used up. Change the maximum time frame that things can be cached, just to try to make sure that that everyone's not pulling down 3 gig each time. Now, if people haven't gone back to work yet in your environment, if they're all still working remotely, probably a bit less of an issue because it's not your bandwidth you need to be concerned about. But maybe you still want to go through and start tweaking settings to make sure that not necessarily on the DO side, but tweaking settings so that you're trying to minimize bandwidth reduction. Because if someone's working at home while 3 other people in the house are watching Netflix or whatever, just sort of to try to make it a little bit more balanced. Now, the final thing I've got on here is that the driver, there is a driver and firmware approval private preview for WolfBee. Now, this is something that I think, was it like March or April? Actually, I think this was announced at the last Ignite Online. So this has been around for a while. Oh God, what's Bruce saying now? I'm too scared to click.
Yeah, let's just gloss over that.
Yeah, and it's not just because Bruce is in Florida. That's not the reason why I'm scared. It's because it's Bruce.
Bruce isn't an MVP, so if he gets access to things, he can say whatever he wants.
Yeah. So with that that private preview, it is. So knowledge of the private preview is public. Microsoft has discussed it. They've shown it. And it was unless you really needed it, it probably wasn't a private preview that you'd want to sign up for because of, I'm trying to think of a word to use to describe what the preview is like versus what the real thing is going to be. And they are very different to each other. So for somebody who really needed this kind of targeting and approval process, that private preview might have made sense. But if it was just more casual curiosity, it really wasn't anything that would make a lot of sense there for you. Now, I guess just here on the Windows Update for Business side, was there so I think it was like when I sort of asked people, what options were you going to be using? I think, WFB seemed to be the one that did, Kenneth basically Kenneth gave the sole response there, I think. WFB mostly. It's just the easiest option.
Yeah.
I'm going to contest that there, Mark. The easiest option is to give out new computers. The easiest, cheapest option is to use WFB.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, why not coincide the rollout of Windows 11 with a whole new fleet of upgraded operating systems
that support Windows 11?
11 natively. Yeah.
No, we got a bunch of refurbed Surface Book 2s.
We got them at a really good price. Yeah. We found the PCs that were still sitting in storage from when Grays Online still existed. So we got them at a really good price.
We found them on eBay. Some company was just getting rid of them, but I don't know why. They just did a really good deal on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then I guess just the final slide then before we do just sort of go into the open conversation piece is just good old consumer Windows Update. And this is really not going to be too, any different overall to the Windows 10 experience, where they're going through and basically they're looking at your device details and going, is this device a good candidate to receive Windows 11? Yes or no? Now, this was something that I got to see, so this is something that I got to see firsthand during the Windows 10 previews when it went from preview to GA of Windows 10. A good old Sony Vaio, and any of you who've worked with Vaio devices over the years, there's definitely a love and hate relationship, and depending on what day of the week it is, that determines how far you're leaning in either direction. But for those of you not familiar with it, Sony did some really cool hardware designs, but did terrible things with slightly altering things like chipset IDs, like requiring a slightly different build of a standard Intel Wi-Fi driver or video card driver. So you couldn't just go to the Intel site and get things. You had to go and get the Sony specific versions. So I had a Sony PC that, a good old Vaio VPC-Z, I think. And it's one of the devices that's finally hit a roadblock because it doesn't have TPM2 because it's an old Sony device. Yeah. And during the Windows 10 period, it was interesting watching that block because it didn't matter how I tried to install Windows 10 GA onto it, or I guess 1507, 1507, it would just sort of get blocked straight through Windows Update. If I tried to do like an install from ISO, it'd get partway through the install and then roll back saying, sorry, this is not for you. But then one day, magically, I turned it on and it said, Windows 10 is ready for install. So basically they go through and it's like, okay, what's the issue? And then they start unlocking more devices over time. But I guess the difference here though, is that on the Windows 10 side, there probably weren't as many concerns about any major hardware requirement changes that this time around, TPM, et cetera, CPU gen, they're things that are basically going to mean that there are going to be a bunch of devices that just aren't even offered this moving forward. And those that don't, and so if you do have a device that you believe is supported and it's not getting offered through Windows Update, it's probably a good idea to sit back and wait for it, unless you're willing to rebuild and just sort of do a clean install and hope for the best. Because sometimes those things, that approach can work.
I have a good question from Kenneth. Mark, I have a mouthful of jerky again. So the driver firmware in Windows Update for Business, the approval in private preview, does this mean that approved drivers will be deployed as well, and not just listed as optional updates?
They will be deployed.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Given that it's a private preview, we can't commit either way.
And until it goes final, because I guess the challenge there is if they turn up under that optional updates view, which most people would never click on, and I don't know how many of you occasionally check that. And for me, it just causes confusion because I see things and it's like, well, I know I've got that hardware in here. It's not banged out in Device Manager, so should I risk it? And the answer is probably no. That's why it's saying optional. If it's working, just leave it as is. But
See, I'm the opposite. I just go and install everything.
I try to rely on WinUpdate for drivers if I can. A few things where I won't, even though it would make sense to do it for video card drivers, because I want the other crap.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's probably one of the rare things where I want the crap as opposed to trying to avoid the crap. And I think on that note, I think I do have, I won't, of course, actually I should start it now. Nothing could obviously go wrong, but I think NVIDIA is telling me that a new game-ready driver update is available.
So that's actually quite interesting. They released a 0-day game-ready driver for Windows 11. This is nothing to do with the IT pro space at all, but they're just being prepared for some of the new API functionalities that Windows 11 is going to afford game developers. So it's actually quite interesting to see that NVIDIA's so closely sort of in lockstep with the operating system releases as well, not just games.
Yeah. So and now looking at Jacob's comment, if you were just doing the Windows Update driver install for, and I can only speak to NVIDIA stuff at this point. I don't think I've still got a box of old AMD GPUs, but by box I mean cardboard box. I don't mean
Paperweights?
PC. Yeah. Oh, these are all like pre-release versions of the first round of Radeons that were released under the AMD branding, not the ATI branding. So maybe I can throw them at people on the street and say, actually, I can give them to kids who come around
for Halloween,
trick or treat. Yeah, here, have a
give this to you.
This card is pure evil. So on the NVIDIA side, you do get, it will go through and pull down the Windows Store version of that NVIDIA control panel. But if you want the full, like, what's that software called? I don't even know what that GeForce Experience software. GeForce Experience. I think you'd need to install at least do one install of the NVIDIA package.
Yeah. And
I think your video driver will still get updated through Windows Update. And I'm sure at some point having, I could just imagine the potential for things clashing eventually becoming an issue, but hopefully there's enough decoupling between the driver and the generic application that it shouldn't really cause too much of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, the GeForce Experience application is primarily around. So it does two things, right? It checks to see whether your driver's up to date and whether there's a new one, but then it also allows you to do like per application tweaking of the graphics card and sort of how that renders. So there shouldn't, in theory, be any major differences if you just do the driver update as opposed to also running that. Like if you update the driver for your graphics card outside of the GeForce Experience application, it's just going to know that you're at the latest version. So there shouldn't be any actual clashes there.
Yeah. So then the other thing as well, what about NVIDIA Studio drivers? Is there a way to get those through Windows Update to force it to use Studio versus the game ready?
I'm not sure. I mean,
The thing to note as well with the drivers that are published in Windows Updates, you'll probably find that they're a little bit further out of date than what you'll get from vendor. Just for the Delta timeframe to get them published.
For sure. So Mark, with I don't know anything about the Studio ones, but I mean the drivers are arguably the same unless they're on different like beta versions or something.
I think there's like my suspicion is probably just that the studio drivers are probably just an older version that has got proven reliability. So they want something that's not going to crash in Blender or anything along those lines, or Photoshop. So it's basically, sitting back. So it's not going to necessarily be optimized for a game release, which kind of aligns with what you'd be wanting to do with Windows Update for Business. You'd want to be pushing out things that maybe not the latest version, but are more reliable.
Yeah. Okay. So
what you're saying, it's the enterprise ready version.
Basically, yeah. Your long-term servicing branch. So basically, yes, the studio drivers are the LTSB or LTSC of the graphics card drivers. They are designed specifically to be optimized for rendering applications and things like that. They know they're always going to work. There's never going to be anything that potentially breaks. Whereas the game-ready stuff is generally coincides with the release of larger games and larger operating systems. So things like Windows 11 or fancy new video games. But yeah, so like that's pretty much the difference.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess now let's just sort of open it up to the, I guess, just general conversation. So not slide driven now. So I guess just for anyone who's sort of got questions or has wants to sort of share what their experiences have been so far. So things that you've liked, things that have caught you out that maybe you don't like just yet, that maybe you will learn to like over time. So I guess let's just sort of open it up now. So anything that didn't sort of fall neatly into one of those other areas we just covered, if you want to sort of either unmute or again just drop something into chat and we can chat about it while we've still got the majority of people online.
Yeah. I just while I've got a captive audience, just let everyone know that my experience of doing an in-place upgrade to Windows 11 was an absolute nightmare. Very high chance that it was because I had some stupid software installed doing some weird stuff to my operating system. But essentially, I was left with a build of Windows 11 that did not install or could not install the updated Apex files for Cortana and the Start menu, which resulted in me being presented with the Windows 10 Start menu that was not active. So I had the taskbar, but I did not have a Start menu. And there was a bunch of ways that I could identify exactly what the cause was, but I could not resolve that. So the fix was to rebuild my machine, which is obviously, in a corporate space, if that happens, the proverbial would hit the fan. But
arguably they wouldn't have the customizations you had around the Start menu.
Exactly, and this is why my big sort of caveat there is I do dumb things, so I take the responsibility of that. But on my I have multiple test laptops, and they did an in-place just fine. So just be aware that if you've got some fancy stuff on there because you think you're clever like me, you may get stung.
So I assume that your backup before you did the install, that backup, the restore didn't work.
No, that's actually quite funny.
I'm joking.
No. But so when I did the Windows 11 preview version through the correct channels, I obviously had that ability to roll back because I did it, and I just didn't like the experience. The Start menu didn't cascade over to the second screen. It immediately killed any potential for my workflows. So I just rolled back the update, and it was fine. It worked really well. But when I did the latest in-place upgrade, I didn't do the native channel because I guess it was rolling out through regions, and I hadn't hit the it hadn't been
or your hardware wasn't cleared yet.
Potentially, but for whatever reason, I didn't get the gate did not open for me to get it natively, so I did it myself, and by doing that, removed the ability to roll back the update because it wasn't an update. It was
So I just thought I'd bring my contribution up, which is what the autopilot screen now looks like. If I did not have this customization text down here, why are you here? There's nothing here that would make me think that autopilot had succeeded. Because previously you'd be getting, company name, you'd be getting your company, the small company logo, etc.
You do get a company branding there. I can attest to that.
Okay, so do you have to change any configuration settings?
No.
Okay, so
shouldn't need to.
Okay, so the only branding that I've got showing up here, which is showing that Autopilot is working, is the customization text, but nothing else. So you can imagine landing on that screen and going, "Oh crap, Autopilot's broken."
Yeah,
and then you look a bit closer and go,
"Yeah." I took a photo of it and shared it with the team, but it's going to take me ages to find it. But 100% our the Autopilot experience, or the Ubi experience for us, was definitely branded to our sort of corporate branding.
Okay, so even on this landing page, even on the sign-in page, it was customized?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, what happens if you put in your email address?
Like no, so everything works as expected.
Sure.
So
it's
just there's no visual indication.
I wonder if it's the size of the image. I want, because you know how you can,
well, because now, because even looking at that, that's a different. I wonder if it takes the larger image and scales it down, whereas I think I've only got a small image in mine. I'll have a look and see, because it's like that just doesn't, like when I look at that, that makes me think I'm about to sign into the Microsoft tenant, just based on what we had previously.
I'll spin up a virtual machine tomorrow and send you a screenshot to show that it does the branding. And I'll have a dig around to see, whether we've got anything weird, but I don't think we do.
It's going to complain because it's been sitting there for too long. Oh no, everybody knows my number now.
88.
88.
Ticket number 88.
Does that mean my chicken schnitzel's ready for pickup?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
You better go.
In bingo, isn't that like 2 fat ladies?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking at first I thought two geese swimming, or 2 swans, and then I thought, oh no, that's 22.
Peter had a good question just around sort of what the time frame was for the in-place upgrades. It's been a while since I've done a proper full in-place upgrade, or I guess it's comparable to like the the H1 or the H2 releases, so the big feature updates. It's still a significant amount of time to be offline, but it's not the end of the world. I would probably put it down to maybe 15 minutes, a couple of reboots in play. Not something you'd want to do during business hours, if you can avoid it.
This might take a few minutes. They should just change it to this will take a few minutes at least.
I mean, it might not.
Yeah.
I do like the blue glowing orb design.
I'll just take a quick look. Okay, well, seeing that we're not getting any other questions.
So now it's going to bounce.
I'll stop recording in case anyone's got any questions that they would like to ask outside of a recorded